All right, we're on to 6.3. This is the normalization process. Again, this is how we get from, hey, here's a bunch of data that the business says we have, to, okay, let's start going through our tables and thinking a little bit more systematically about this and really going through and making sure it's almost a checklist here. And the idea is that each table here represents a single entity, or a single noun, really, right? So we have a table like student. That is all about student data. We had a table like course. That was all about course data. Or for our discussion practice, right, we had a table about plane that had all the plane data. We had a table about pilot that had all the pilot data in it. So that's one of the things we're looking for. We don't want to have a mix and match sort of thing here. We want to have one table represents one thing. And then we want each row and column, right? So for a given row, for a given column, it represents one value. So that's no multi-value here. Single value only. And then we want to make sure that we have controlled redundancy. So that we don't store the same data more than once, right? So not storing data more than one time. Now, we understand foreign keys are the controlled redundancy here, right? So we can store a foreign key in more than one place because that represents the rest of it here. All right, now we're going to throw around some more terms here. This is all non-prime. And that means everything that's not in a key, essentially. All non-prime attributes depend on the primary key. The primary key here. So if you're not part of the primary key, you depend on the primary key. So you're determined by the primary key. So that idea, if I know what your primary key is, if I know what your student ID is, all of that student data is dependent upon that unique student ID. Okay, so all non-prime attributes here. And then the idea is that we don't allow for, or essentially we have no data anomalies. So no trouble, no integrity issues, no consistency issues. We're making sure that we're storing data that relates to other data, so we can't delete something that we're relating to with the foreign key. We can't update something a way that we're relating to with the foreign key, and we can't insert something with the bad foreign key. Remember, one of those jobs of the relational database management system is to make sure that, hey, if I say I have a foreign key here, this section relates to the course over here, that there actually is a course with that ID in the course table. Right? It's making sure we have referential integrity is our technical term for that. So again, we're going to look at these different normal forms. So in the process of ensuring all of these, we go from just non-normalized data or unnormalized data, just regular data, right? We just get data, to first normal form, 1NF. And with first normal form is we're now in real table format. We have no multi-valued attributes, multi-value, and we have a primary key. So if you can identify the primary key that uniquely identifies each row in that table, and you got rid of your multi-valued attributes, you are officially in first normal form. Great. We're going to look through some of these and practice more of these. In second normal form, you are in first normal form, and you have no partial dependencies. That means you only depend on part of the primary key. And we'll talk about that when we get there. We'll look at some examples and see what is a partial dependency here. Not too big of a deal. We'll get to it. Don't worry. This is the whole process. And then in third normal form, that is second normal form, plus we have no transitive dependencies. So again, this is another funny thing to look at. We'll get there when we look at what a transitive dependency is. We'll talk about all that as we look through this process. And again, there's that voice cod normal form and fourth normal form. We don't really care. We'll mention them a little bit, but we're not going to deal with them. Essentially, third normal form is our goal, right? We put a big star here for this one because that's the one we want to get to. That's the one that we like. So one of the things that you can do is we want to start listing out all of our data, right? So when we looked at our course data, right, you can kind of draw it out in this form here, and this helps you draw the dependency graphs here. So we'll say, hey, I have an ID for course. Sure. We're going to call this one the primary key, right? We like that. Has a nice ID here. Course has a department. Right? Course has a name. So this is our course entity or our course table. Course has a number of credits. Okay. Sure. That's all fine. Let's see, what else might course have? So it has name, number, name and number, right? The course number here. We probably also have that. Course number. Sure, we've got that. And we probably have a description. Right, we probably have a course description. And then maybe we also track some more information about course here. Maybe we have the prof here who created the course, is the lead for the course. Maybe we'll say lead prof here. The lead prof. Maybe that's their who is going to be in charge of this course, responsible for evaluation and all sorts of that fun stuff that we do here. And then maybe we have some other information too, right? It kind of depends, right? We could put lots of things in here. This one's probably pretty good. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this and say, okay, is the department of a given course dependent on its ID? Is it its primary key? Does it determine which department it belongs in? Yeah, because for each course will have a unique primary key, and that will determine each of these are dependent fully on the entire primary key here. Sure. Maybe another approach here, if we're not using the ID, and the book does a nice job of this. So instead of using ID, what if we had if our course table here had department and number as a composite primary key. So like CIS1200, right? If both of these here were the primary key as a composite, or more than one attribute determining this here. So if we didn't have number, if we just had department and number, right? And then we had credits, name, credits, description, and lead prof here, right? Sure. Would we say that the department and number both determine the course name? Yeah, right? That probably does, right? They determine the name, sure. Do they determine the credits? Yeah, sure, determines the credits. Does it determine the description? Yeah, it determines the description. And does it determine the lead prof? Yeah, right? So for a given unique department and number, right, we'll know who the lead prof is, we'll know the course description, we'll know the number of credits, we'll know the name of the course. So all of our information is functionally dependent on the primary key. Right? We have to know what the primary key is to determine these because they're uniquely identified. Okay. Now you probably don't have two courses with the same name, but again, maybe you would. Who knows? I can't think of one actually that would have the same name, but sure. So a partial dependency comes into play when you don't depend on the entire primary key. Right? So if we didn't care what department you were in, if we only cared about the number, so maybe we also had something in here like the course level, right? This was, a freshman course, or this was a sophomore course, that sort of thing. The course level is not going to depend on the department. A course level would only depend on the course number. Right? So all 100 or all 1,000 level courses are freshman courses. All 2,000 level courses are sophomore level courses. That sort of thing. So that would be a partial dependency because this attribute only depends on part of the primary key. Right? We don't care about the department. The level has nothing to do with what department's offering it. Right? All 1,000 level classes are freshmen, all 2,000 level classes are sophomore. So, right, if your course number is 1 anything, it's a freshman, 2 anything, it's a sophomore course. Right, and that's typically how we number them. And if you move on to a 4-year degree, a 4-year bachelor's program, typically you'll have the 300 and 400 level classes your junior and senior year. Now, it's not a hard and fast rule that you can't take 200 or 2,000 level courses in your freshman year, but in general, like, we kind of rank them this way. And typically, 100 level courses are easier than 200 level courses, and 200 level courses are easier than 300 level courses, and 300 level courses are easier than 400 level courses, because they kind of, you need to have a broader base of knowledge to take those higher level courses, is sort of the idea. So it's not necessarily the course itself is harder, but you need to have more knowledge in that particular field for that to make a lot of sense. So that's our dependency here. Now, you can also have this transitive dependency. And a transitive dependency is when you're dependent on something that is dependent on the primary key. And that's kind of a funny example. We'll go through one in the book in a minute. I'm not going to draw one out here in course because we don't really have a good one here in course. It might be, we could do this here. We could say, hey, maybe our school was funny here and it wanted to have a additional charge for higher level courses. So we might have, additional charge or something, additional charge. And you might think this is crazy, but they do this places where the 300 and 400 level classes cost more per credit, right? There's the regular cost per credit hour, and then there's a credit premium or course premium based on the level of the course. So a transitive dependency would mean, hey, this is really dependent upon the level of the course, which is dependent upon the number of the course. Again, this is sort of a contrived example. We could really figure out the additional charge based on the number, but the rule says, hey, a freshman course, there's no additional charge. Sophomore course, no additional charge. Junior, it's plus $100 or something like that, a credit. And senior, maybe that's still another plus $100 a credit or something like that. And again, there's all sorts of different rules depending on what organization or what school you go to. These sorts of things happen. So that additional charge is only transitively dependent upon the primary key, right? Because it depends on the level, which depends on this one here, and it's still partial. And we'll get into those in a little bit and how we do this conversion process. So the first thing we're going to look at, right, is converting to first normal form. And we looked at, hey, if I had my employee table and I had that search list, right? If you had ID and you had name and you had salary and also and you had certs, right? It was getting rid of that certs here, getting rid of those repeating groups, getting rid of those multi-valued attributes, and figuring out, okay, I need to put those into another table. Right, great, we can do that. We can look at how we can take a many-to-many relationship and get rid of those repeating groups. The second piece of that is, how do I then identify what the primary key is? Right, so step one is get rid of multi-value. So get rid of the multi-valued attributes, right? Multi-valued attributes, MVA. If I write it all out, it's just kind of nonsense anyway. Step two is finding the primary key. What field or fields, right, you could have a composite key, will uniquely identify this given row in the table. If we can do that, great, we've got our primary key. Then our third step is to identify those dependencies. See, where is my data dependent? Right? And we're going to look at all of those different things and see, okay, what field do you really depend on? And you can draw these diagrams, and they're super helpful to see, okay, this depends on this, this depends on this, this depends on this, here's the primary key, that sort of thing. So it's a dependency diagram. So those are really useful and helpful to practice and start sketching out a couple as the book goes through some examples. You can draw out these dependency diagrams, label your primary keys, show your dependencies, whether or not they're partial or transitive within it, and we can better identify as we go through this normalization process where we're getting to. Right? So once we've gotten to first normal form, we have primary keys, we have no repeating groups, right? And we have dependency on the primary key. Now, it doesn't need to be full dependency. Partial dependencies are okay, transitive dependencies are okay. As long as we are dependent on the primary key, we've gotten to first normal form. Right? That's fantastic. That was the goal here. Once we've gotten to first normal form, then we can start looking at, okay, second normal form. To do that, I need to start making more tables. So we have more tables here to remove the, to remove all of our partial dependencies. So that's step one, right? If there's a partial dependency, okay, well, that means we have different pieces of data that don't depend fully on the primary key. Maybe we can break those out and look at, okay, how do we break these ones out here? So in our example, we said, okay, where's our table here? The course level was dependent on the number, right? And the additional charge was dependent on the course level as well. Sure, we can do that. So another table that we need to have then is, we might have like course level, perhaps, right? Course level. And this would have freshman, sophomore, right? Junior, senior. Again, we don't have the junior and senior classes. That's okay. That sort of thing. And additionally, then we could put in that additional charge. Here, we could have the charge cost as well, right? Where there's additional 0, 0, plus 100, plus 100, whatever those additional charges were, could be broken off into another table, right? So we can say, okay, hey, this is where those belong. Right? Here's the definition of our course level, right? Then we can split the data out, right? We can reassign all of these dependent attributes to the other tables. So we're going to take them out of the course table. These don't belong in the course table. We're going to move them out to their own table. And then we need to see how are we going to reference them, right? So what is the relationship going to be now between course and course level? What depends on what here? Right, so our course, we said, hey, this was a department, and the number was our primary key, this composite key over here, right? We still had name, we still had credits, and we still had the prof, or the lead prof, right? Whoever was kind of essentially in charge of the class here. So we still have all of that, and then we have this course level table on its own here, right? We've broken it apart because we don't want to have that partial dependency in the course table. And essentially, the reason is it's repeated data, right? If this ever changes, if we ever change any of this information here, I have to go update it in every single course ever that exists there. Right? That's not going to work very well for me. That's just, it's not a great fit there. And again, you would say a course only has a single course level, right? But a course level, many courses will be in that course level, so we have to kind of look at what that relationship is here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make another table here to fit that relationship. Right? So because we wanted to get rid of that partial dependency, well, okay, sure, we can get rid of that partial dependency, and then we can move it off to another table. Or in this case, yeah, if we've got, so one course will have one course level, but one course level many courses will have one course level, right? But a single course will only have one level. So we need to, how are we going to store that course and the course level information here? And that's this process, right? We're identifying the tables. We're going to make sure we have no partial dependency. So everything that's in this table here needs to depend completely on the entire primary key. When we look at this, what's left here, right? We can't have that course level piece that only really depended on the number. So we could have a, maybe this is just level here. This might be a better name for it here. This is the level, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Sorry, that's really, really bad, right? Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, right? Those sort of levels like that. Then the joining table then could be course level. We could say, hey, we're going to make a course level table. And really, what this is going to have then is a number and the corresponding level, right? Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, a level. So for any course number, right, it will have a determined level. And then a given course then will relate to one course level. Because all we need is that number field in this table. We don't care about the department. So hey, this course at 1200, all 1200 courses are the freshman level. right? Doesn't matter what department you're in. If your course number is 1200, you're in the department level, or in the freshman level, right? So that's the process of eliminating those partial dependencies here. Now, we're not going to worry about transitive dependencies yet. We'll pick that up in the next video because that's a whole other topic that's going to need another example.